Hi, I'm Douglas Mason, President and CEO of Magnum Gold Corp. Inc., MGI on the TSX Venture Exchange. A 2015 drill program on the LH property intersected high-grade gold, including 16.9 meters of 13.58 grams and 11 meters of 20.66 grams per ton gold. A follow-up drill program is planned to further evaluate previously identified subsurface high-grade gold mineralization. Please visit our website at magnumgoldcorp.com.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Stewart Muir, Executive Director of the Resource Works Society. Welcome back to the show, Stewart.
Thank you, Jim.
You're in the nation's capital. What's going on there?
Well, I'm out here to meet with a few people about the resource issues of mining, forestry, oil and gas, renewable energy, transportation of all these things. I try to get out to Ottawa a couple of times a year and make sure that they don't forget BC's there, because that's really easy to happen in Ottawa, believe me.
And so what have you reminded them about?
I've reminded them that, if you have legislators sitting in the Parliament in Ottawa and they think it's a great idea to do things like ban shipping on the Northwest Coast, ban the movement of some of those most important commodities through shipping, something that's done safely around the world, including on the Atlantic coast, around, every ocean, every port, every country in the world, but they're trying to stop it for British Columbia, and they're trying to stop the economic development of the West. They're hurting all Canadians. And that's what this bill before Parliament is. It's incredibly destructive, incredibly disrespectful of our First Nations. It really is, staggering the arrogance that we see in Ottawa towards the West and First Nations. The complaints, I was up in the northwest of BC last week. The First Nations who are affected by this damaging bill are really upset about it, because it limits them in what they can do on their land base. If they can't have shipping come into those ports to carry Canadian-produced commodities to market, there's not a lot going on up there economically that they could develop. So this is a big, important issue, and in Ottawa, they just don't care about the West.
What are some of the things they're trying to stop?
They're trying to stop tankers carrying fuel.
Well, how do people up there stay warm if they can't get fuel?
Well, I don't think they really think about that in Ottawa. They don't really care. They've got some very nice houses and condos here. They're blessed with a great airport. They can go to New York City or Bahamas. I guess the finance minister can go and spend more time with his money down there and that kind of thing. But as far as awareness of what we need in the West to develop our economy, they really seem not very interested. Not that there's lack of information. Not that there's lack of some really great legislators and senators from the West who try to speak up, but I'll tell you, they're not interested here.
What can we do to improve the situation?
Well, I think those who have identified this issue as well need to speak up. That means calling your MP, writing, being active in social media. That's something that politicians do listen to, making it known. And the tanker ban is simply unacceptable for the future development of the country, for the economic advancement of First Nations in that territory, who are saying, they're writing to the Prime Minister. They're saying, don't do this. This is a mistake. Of course we want to protect the waterways and the oceans. We know we've got the best mariners and Coast Guard in the world to protect it. We know that even though things weren't perfect in the past, the state of safety for shipping commodities by sea has just advanced so much since you think of Exxon Valdez in Alaska, that terrible incident over 25 years ago. That was a wake-up call to the world's shipping companies, mariners, regulators. And if you look at what they've done since then and how that's impacted safety, it is a different world now. So whenever I hear someone comparing today to then and not acknowledging how things have changed, I think they're really not making a credible argument that, it's unsafe to send our biggest exports to their markets, especially in the Far East, where there's a great need for responsibly produced, sound and environmentally sustainable crude oil, natural gas that we produce here.
Don't tankers on the West Coast have to be double-hulled? And have there been no major accidents involving double-hulled tankers?
Oh, that's correct. And, you look at the number of pilots they have on board to get through the waters. We got some tricky waters here, but everywhere in the world has got some tricky waters. We've got weather. The whole world has got weather. And, we have a track record of dealing with that. We have tugs, these super tugs. There's a maritime safety program being put into effect. It seems as if the federal government view is the South Coast, we can do tanker shipping safely, no problem, but not in the North Coast. Well, that's illogical. And, they're not saying we can't do it safely on the Atlantic coast or in the North. They're just saying there's this one little spot where we're incompetent to go about our business safely, which is preposterous.
Stewart, you're also planning to let people know about how natural resources can be respectfully used, and you have a conference planned?
Well, that's right. We've been studying over this past year at ResourceWorks. You can go and see a series we've done, the Naturally Resourceful series, which is actually inspired by something our Prime Minister said a couple of years ago, that we're known as a country with resources, but we want to be known as being resourceful. And I think he's absolutely right in that. When Prime Minister Trudeau said those words, or words like that in Switzerland a couple of years ago at an international conference. And the way I interpret that, and so many people in Vancouver, the people whose careers are in mining, supporting mining, they're in energy in all its different forms, they're in forestry, the great traditional driving industry of BC. There's so much work being done now, and it took me a while to realize it. I've been doing my ResourceWorks project for a couple of years, and what's happened is Vancouver and BC generally have become a sort of cluster of innovation to do natural resources responsibly and well, efficiently, profitably, safely for the environment, in such a fashion that the knowledge we've produced to do that is becoming an export in itself. So it's not just that we're shipping our lumber or our coal or natural gas, minerals to other markets in exchange for the currency we need to buy the orange juice and iPhones that we all need and want. It's not just that. It's that we've got the brain power, our universities, our research institutes, our companies that invest in innovation. We've got the brain power to actually send that know-how around the world, whether it's Africa, South American mining, whether it's opening up natural gas potential in China. We've got people doing that. We've got people protecting waterways and the environment because they've developed the expertise, because Canada's got these incredibly stiff regulations that force innovation. So that's what, the modern story of Vancouver is all about. And so to celebrate that on the 29th of November, we're having a lunch. Actually, anyone listening here, if they want, could sign up and come to that event. If you go to Eventbrite, you type in Naturally Resourceful, those two words, it'll pop up. I guarantee it. And you'll be able to read more about it and decide if you want to come. And I'd invite anyone to find me at that event if they make it. I'd love to make your acquaintance. We're always looking to enlarge our movement of support for, doing the things that will make Canada prosperous into the future, and that depends on resources and doing them right. So that's what it's about. I can tell you more about our guests, Jim, as well. We've got some pretty interesting people going to be there.
Well, go ahead. Where is it going to be held? When is it going to be held? Who's going to be there? Oh,
yeah. Well, it's going to be at the Hyatt, downtown Vancouver, on the 29th at 11:30, and that's a Wednesday. We're going to have a representative from the province of British Columbia, Fazil Millar, Deputy Minister of Jobs, Trade, and Technology. That's really the sweet spot of where the economy is going, the knowledge economy, employment and exports and imports, that's trade, and of course technology and innovation. So we're going to hear from the Deputy Minister about the province's plans to encourage the people who are the hundreds of companies who are based in BC, who are already doing this innovative work to support the resource sector. How are they in Victoria going to encourage the success in exporting that know-how? So that's a keynote. Then we're going to have a panel of experts. We'll have a representative from a new mining center that's launching actually next week out at UBC. Some of the global mining innovators based out at Point Grey will have their their chief representative, coming to join a panel. We'll also have the head of technology and innovation for one of our biggest, most successful Canadian resource companies. It's called Canadian Natural Resources Limited. They're in everything, oil and gas and mining, huge company. We'll have Joy Romero from that company coming out. She's the vice president, talking about how they are developing this ecosystem of innovation that affects so many companies and jobs in Vancouver and BC. And we'll have someone from the forest industry. So we're going to, have a chinwag about the issues. I'll be leading the panel discussion myself, and we'll have students attending. We have people from these companies, and I think that we're going to have a very good discussion about what we can do in 2018 to advance this agenda.
We'll have more with Stewart Muir right after the break.
Glance Technologies owns and operates Glance Pay, a disruptive mobile payment technology now live in 16 cities in Canada and about to launch in the U.S. With revenues up 664% in the last quarter, Glance Technologies has the potential to be a worldwide leader in an industry projected to grow to $1.3 trillion in 3 years. Glance Technologies stock symbols are GLNFF in the U.S. and GET in Canada. Find out more at glancepay.com.
Lotus Ventures Inc. is a BC-based medical marijuana company poised to launch into the rapidly evolving cannabis sector. Lotus is in the final review stage of the Health Canada approvals to become a licensed producer, having arranged facility financing of up to $12 million, plus building permits for its prototype indoor production facility. Shares trade under the symbol J on the Canadian Securities Exchange. Visit our website at lotusventures.ca.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Stewart Muir. Stewart, you were in Terrace, BC, taking a look at natural resource development there and how local folks there seem to be very enthusiastic about it. Can you tell us more about it?
Well, I was up at the Nation to Nation conference, and that's about the Aboriginal and Indigenous-owned businesses that are looking to find ways for job creation and economic development on primarily the rural territories. So we heard from a representative from the BC AFN, the Assembly of First Nations, and we talked to a number of local officials, people from industry, about what the opportunities are. How do First Nations in this day and age, if they want to develop healthy communities in rural areas that aren't necessarily close to the SkyTrain, maybe they're hundreds of kilometers away from that kind of infrastructure, but they want to have the sort of things that their kids see on TV or on their phones. They want to have that life there. How do you have that prosperous life without it being based on the big chiefs in Ottawa just giving you a bunch of money all the time? Yeah, I think there's so many First Nations who are crying out for those opportunities. And up in the Northwest, that's close to the Golden Triangle, as that rich mining area is known. There's so many areas of potential. The mining industry in Canada is the biggest employer of the First Nations and Aboriginal people generally. So that's an area that we know is important. The number of First Nations representatives I spoke to who told me about their anguish at this terrible law that Ottawa seems ready to pass to drive them into permanent poverty on the tanker ban. I mean, it's very distressing what they're going through up there. That a government that claims to be all about bringing the First Nations forward is actually doing the opposite in British Columbia. It's horrifying. It really is. And you can find that out. Anyone can find that out by going to talk to people up there, which I don't know if they do in Ottawa very often. And one of the more interesting things, the bright side, was what the city of Terrace is doing. Now, Terrace is a town that goes back to the Second World War. It really was just a little blip. Wasn't much there until about 1939, and that's when the Alaska Highway plans were developed into 1941. And there were thousands of troops who ultimately were set up there. They built this highway. Terrace is one of the big staging posts for that. And it grew and grew from there. They have a great airport as a result of the activity there. And what they've done now, I had a tour around. They've developed an industrial park. It's got a couple of different parts to it. And what they see is the fact that, it's a community. It's close to the great new expanded smelter nearby in Kitimat. It's on the rail line that runs down to the port of Prince Rupert, which is a straight shot into Chicago. It's a line that links Asian production to American consumers, and everything just moves through Terrace. And so they're looking for ways to advantage their unique position and their proximity to some of these big industries and the potential of mining is quite exciting. So I'm looking forward to finding ways for the world to become more aware of what's going on in Terrace. I think that what's good for the Northwest is good for BC and good for Canada, and hopefully we can build awareness of that.
Mm-hmm. So what do the people there want to see?
Well, they want to see a diversified economy. I think that's probably the number one thing. Not just from talking to people, I think I hear that, but also if I look at some of the opinion research, I'm a bit of a data nerd, and I look at data. You can see that everyone is interested in this question: how do we not rely on just one thing or just a few things? How do we diversify and have greater resilience to get through the boom and bust cycles that affect pretty much every part of the economy? How do we ensure that there are interesting jobs that keep the young in those smaller towns, especially because a family up there, they don't mind if their kids go off and study, go to college, get a trade, whatever it is somewhere else, but they do want to see them come home and have something to come home to, so they can have their grandkids eventually in their community. Everyone wants that. That's a basic human desire, but it's very challenging if you have a community that doesn't have a diverse array of jobs that those kids can come home to. So it's really about the survival of these economies, and they're taking it very seriously. So diversification, that means that you have people in the technical trades. I talked about the naturally resourceful program here. To me, big part of that is how do we ensure that we have, the skills needed to compete globally, to, become, or celebrate the fact we already are a leader in these advanced technical services supporting responsible resources. And that's something you can do as easily from Terrace as you can from downtown Vancouver, where a lot of it happens.
With all the protests that we see in Vancouver, we get the impression First Nations are against the development of natural resources.
I think for sure there's a small fraction who do. And I think, the small fractions that have that viewpoint, I think the protest organizations, a lot of them funded from San Francisco and New York City, have a radar that takes them to those people to encourage them and give them support. But it doesn't mean that, all the noise that the Madison Avenue protest campaigns make is in any way a real expression of what First Nations think in a majority sense. Certainly that's not what I get when I travel around the province and the country, as I do regularly, and talk to First Nations. So I think the public, if you just simply take the headlines and say, well, that's what First Nations think, every day I hear practically from a First Nation leader who says, that's not us, So I think those people, as they find a voice and have more confidence that this other strain of opinion is just an opinion. And let's celebrate the fact we can all have opinions, but let's also respect the need of First Nations to have dignity and self-sufficiency and a real future on their land in the ways that are realistic for them to have.
We'll have more with Stewart Muir right after this.
Hi, I'm Douglas Mason, President and CEO of Rainy Mountain Royalty Corp., RMO, on the TSX Venture Exchange. Rainy Mountain's Brunswick property is located in the Rideout Shear Zone in Ontario, with grab samples running as high as 32 grams per ton gold. A follow-up drill program to test the numerous targets located by recent groundwork will commence later this year. Please visit our website at rmroyalty.com.
Keep informed. Receive our weekly recap of thought-provoking articles, podcasts, and radio delivered to your inbox for free. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage, HowStreet.com. Welcome back. We're speaking with Stewart Muir. Stewart, the Site C Dam right now is in limbo. We don't know if they're going to build it, hold it, or put it back to what it used to be. Whatever happens, it's going to cost the province billions of dollars.
Yes, it is. It's going to cost a lot of money to finish that thing. The upside of that is we have clean power for many decades. That's also inexpensive. The downside is that we don't build it, and it costs a lot of money to put things back the way they were, probably billions, it seems, new information this week, to pay reparations to the First Nations who were pinning our hopes on this project moving ahead. And so it's probably going to cost, $6 billion to cancel it. And then we'll still have to find sources of clean energy for the future, because we will need it, and there's so much misinformation out there, disinformation, I would even say, deliberate misinformation, that, I think it's difficult for someone who's not an expert to watch it and understand what's going on. I think you have to take the time and assess the sources. Everyone wants to, come to a viewpoint on this that is, based on reason. And I think the reasonable view is, let's get this done, because we're going to need a lot more energy of this type in future in this country. And if we can't build this one, how the heck we're going to build any of the, I figure, 200 other Site C equivalents that we're going to need for a full energy transition? It's beyond me.
People say there's alternative sources. Have those sources actually been developed?
Well, that's the thing. To say there's an alternative source and, then demonstrate what that is, something I've yet to see. I know there's plenty of people who say, you just need to go and install some solar panels and you'll be good. Get some geothermal going. Well, I remember when I started my career in media up in Whistler, actually, that was my first job. I was a reporter photographer in the community of Whistler when it wasn't quite as grand as it is nowadays, but I got to ski a lot. They were exploring, that was in the 1980s, they were exploring up in Meager Creek. There was a program, a guy from BC Hydro, I think, had left the company and was exploring up there. That's where the hot springs are, and where there's hot springs, there's heat, and there's, proximity to potential for geothermal. Well, that was over 30 years ago, and, there is no commercial plant. They didn't ever take that very far, unfortunately. It would have been great if they had, I think, but it wasn't there. And there's other places, around the province where you got these, geotechnical hot spots, and you think there's potential there. And, sure, there's countries like Iceland where they've done that. Everyone knows about that. It's wonderful. I'm all for the energy smorgasbord personally, but you got to be realistic and look at the cost of it as well, because people expect to have the same kind of costs. In BC, because of big hydro, all the dams that we've got and have had for decades are real, adjusted cost of electricity is the same as it was in 1967. That's a fact I heard last week, hearing from the chairperson of BC Hydro, who is a new appointee of the new government. So this is not yesterday's man. This is the current government's appointee saying that. I think the reality is, if we want to have affordable power, we need to work with the things that are proven and realistic. If we want to have wildly unpredictable, probably very expensive power, we could take the suggestions of, the Green Party and go build some untested things and, hope that it'll work out. Inevitably it won't, because it doesn't work that way. Hydro is, along with nuclear energy, the biggest contributor to global GHG reductions. Wind and solar, which sound wonderful, I know, they actually don't contribute nearly as much to environmental soundness as those two other highly proven forms of electricity generation.
Stewart, where can people go to learn more about your conference that's going to happen near the end of the month?
Yeah, Jim, if you go to Eventbrite, Eventbrite is a popular event ticketing tool for conferences like this. You just go and you type in the words naturally resourceful and you'll find it. We have still quite a few tickets left, although it's starting to pick up. They're going fast. So if you are interested, I would suggest you act before the end of next week. And I would certainly welcome anyone who comes up to me and identifies that they've heard me on your show, Jim, and look forward to having a chat there. I'll be hanging around after. There'll be lots of time for that.
Stewart, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thank you, Jim.
My guest has been Stewart Muir, the Executive Director of the ResourceWorks Society. His website, resourceworks.com. You're listening to HowStreet.com radio. If you have any questions for Stewart or any of our other guests, you can send them to info@HowStreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thanks for listening.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.